I know it is possible to full screen this computer. And here I am. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Will. Welcome to episode 2 of Built from Scratch, the game development Scratch programming educational stream that nobody asked for. And here we all are doing it. So, just a couple of pieces of record keeping before we jump in this stream. What I'm going to do is every day, weekdays from noon to 1, I'm going to spend an hour working on a video game project using the Scratch programming language. Scratch is this really cool block-based kind of visual programming language for making games, animations, stories, anything that is kind of visual and interactive. It's really, really good for. You can get to Scratch by visiting scratch.mit.edu. And it's free. You can log in, you can make an account and log in, and you can start making your own projects. I am built from scratch with underscores on the Scratch website. So if you are interested in following along with this project in any way by looking at the code that we have made, you can go to here, you can search for built from scratch, and you can probably find my things. And there you go. Yep, you can find some my shared projects, and we can go here. And so what did we do yesterday? This is episode 2, so we did stuff on episode 1. And what we did is we made a very simple system for flying this starship around. We can use the arrow keys to turn, the left and right arrow keys to turn the starship, and we can use the up arrow key to kind of apply the thruster. And so we have this physics, this momentum where whatever direction we are facing, when we apply the thruster, we change our speed in that direction, but we have this inertia, this momentum, and we kind of drift. And so we get this kind of spaceship-y feeling controls, very reminiscent of games like Asteroids. So that's what we did. I'm going to hit stop. I'm going to close this tab. I'm going to go into this tab where I already have the project open. I'm going to full screen again, and I'm going to do one really important, crucial thing that I forgot to do in one of my test streams, which is I'm going to make a copy of this project. I want to save this first. I want to save the original project, one flying the starship, and I'm going to make this one called 2, and I'm not going to put anything in there for now. Well, I will. I'll put scrolling the galaxy, because I think what we're going to do is add scrolling features to this control scheme. So that's a little bit of the plan, a little bit of the kind of contours, the sneak preview of what we're going to do today is try to add some scrolling so that we have these stars in our galaxy that we can fly to, and we can have a kind of a universe that is larger than one screen big. That's the plan for today. The plan for the longer term of the project is to take this really simple framework and just kind of slowly add little features to it. So yesterday we made it so you could fly the starship around. Today we're going to make it so that we have the galaxy contains more stars and more screens, and you can scroll between them. Maybe tomorrow we'll make it so if you go to a star, you can visit a solar system. Maybe after that we'll make it so that you can land on a planet. I don't know exactly what order we will do everything in. That's something that you always have to, you think about ahead of time. But you also make it up as you go along when you're working on a big project like this. And that's the kind of thing I really want to be getting at with this series is how you go from making little pieces of something, little pieces of a game or a website or something like that, and how you put them all together into something big. Because one of the things that's hardest about really getting a project done is figuring out how, it's easy to do a little bit of work here and there, and then figuring out how it all pieces together and makes sense and all is one of the more difficult things about coding. It's one of the more difficult things about projects in general and learning in general, but in particular with coding, there's a tendency for projects to get bigger and bigger and bigger until you can't keep track of them, until you can't understand them in your brain anymore. And so there's a lot of tricks, a lot of things we do to try to mitigate that problem. And so that's what we're gonna experiment with over the course of this project. And I'll probably continue to talk about why, what the kind of the teaching learning goals of this project are, and why we're doing this, like, okay, an hour at a time, live stream the whole project piece by piece, why that feels like a really worthwhile thing to do. But it also is just kind of fun, and it's a fun way to be working on something and building something. And so if you are watching, if you are following along, I also would like to invite you to sign up for a Twitch account and jump into chat and ask me any questions that you have as we go. I will try to answer any questions that people have if you add them to the chat. So with that, I think it is probably time to get started. One thing I have to note, I cannot help but note that for some reason, we have these cute little cat ear things happening. So I don't know. For some reason, the Scratch website has added cute cat animations to its hat blocks. So now I guess we can call them cat blocks. And that's I'm going to note it, and I'm going to keep going. So here we are. We are in episode 2, Scrolling the Galaxy. I've made a new project, so I'm saving the code from the old project. So if you want to see the project kind of grow piece by piece, bit by bit over a long period of time, you will be able to do that just by going to the Scratch website and seeing all of looking at my projects. So we're here. We're in. We have this. This is where we were before. And so if I press the green flag, just to go over it one more time, if I press the green flag, I can fly this ship around. But there's this problem, which is that if I fly over to the right-hand side of the screen, I just sit there on the right-hand side of the screen forever and can't go anywhere else. So this world, the world of this game is not very interesting. It's very small. It is a single screen, and I would like it to be bigger. So how could we do that? There's a bunch of different ways you could imagine making the game world bigger. Different techniques that game developers use, game designers use. We could make it so that when you get to the edge of the screen, you go to another screen, right? You appear on the right-hand side, you go to another screen. You kind of, and it could be like the whole universe could be made up of these little rectangles that are all put together. We could, of course, just zoom out a whole lot. We could just make this starship really tiny, and look at that. Now the world is a lot bigger. Now the starship is a lot smaller, but this is still relatively limited. So it's not big enough. So what we're going to do, let's put this back to 100%. We might actually want the starship to be way smaller than it is, because this is pretty big. It's really according to what art we end up putting in the long run. At the moment, showcasing my beautiful triangle art is not a priority, but if we put it in something that looked really cool, we might want people to see it a little better. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're going to use a technique which is kind of generally called scrolling. So we're going to make it so that as the starship here moves through the universe, instead of if the starship goes to the right, instead of the starship going across the screen like it is now, we're going to try to make a system so that the starship sits in the middle and other things in the universe move around it. Maybe I can make a little diagram just to, I'm going to make a new sprite here and make a little diagram just to explain that a tiny bit better. Make there be no fill, because I'm going to say that this is the screen, or this is the world. Well, let's see. This is the screen. Let's call this the screen. Yeah. And then on the screen, we have our starship. So what's our starship look like? Our starship is this. We're gonna make it green in this picture just for kicks. We have this starship here, right? In this world, we have this starship. The starship sits in the middle of the screen. So I'm going to take these two things, I'm going to group them. I'm going to say this is the screen. And then we're going to have a universe that consists of a lot of stars. So let's just make them these yellow oh, that's the outline. I want the fill. Sure, that's fine. I'm going to hold down, is it shift? Yep, I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm going to make a bunch of little circles of various sizes. And so I'll just be clear here. I'm going to minimize this because we're only really looking at this part. So imagine that this is the screen, and as the starship moves to the right, as the starship moves around, as the starship moves to the right, its position on the screen doesn't change, right? The starship is always in the center of this rectangle. So as it moves to the right, everything else in the universe moves to the left. So the position of the starship doesn't ever change, but where we draw things in relation to the starship changes. And that is how we make the appearance of traveling through this big cosmos. So that's the idea. So I'm going to make a new costume here. I'm going to delete this one because we don't need that diagram anymore. And I'm going to do one thing. I'm going to make this have I'm going to make this be a little circle. Oop, that's a square. Try again. Okay. We have a circle here, and this is going to be a star. Let's make it smaller. That's too big. It's not to scale, obviously. If it was to scale, it would have to be way bigger, and the ship would have to be way smaller. But I'm going to call this a star. I'm going to call this star. And I'm going to go to the code here. But really, I don't need to be working with that star sprite initially to talk about scrolling. What I really want to do is go into my starship here and think a little bit more before we get going. Because we need to build a structure for thinking about how we draw things to the screen and where we put them, and how that all works, because Scratch doesn't have any of that stuff built in from the get-go. Scratch has all of these great things built in for taking a sprite and putting it on a position in the screen, but it doesn't have a way of thinking of there being a wider world, a wider universe of stuff outside of the screen, right? So Scratch has these variables for the X and Y position of a given sprite, but those X and Y positions for the sprite are always exactly the position where the sprite is being drawn on the screen, right? They are the position of where the sprite is being drawn on the screen. So if the starship is going to always stay in the center of the screen, if the starship is going to if the starship is going to always be in the center of the screen, then its X and Y position will never change. But if we're flying around, something is going to change, right? There's going to be some position, something that represents this position of the starship in the universe, and that is going to change. And so for that, we're going to need to make some variables, and we're going to need to make a system for where we for for keeping track of how this universe position is related to the screen position of the starship, of the stars, things like that. So for that, we're going to need two different things. The first thing we're going to need is a X and Y position for the location of the starship in the galaxy, an X and Y position for the location of the star in the galaxy, and then we're going to need something I'm going to call the camera, which is going to keep track of the relationship between where things are drawn based on their universe positions. So that's a bit of a mouthful. To get started, I'm going to go to variables, and I'm going to make a variable. I'm going to go for this sprite only again, and I'm going to call it I don't know, universe X. And I'm going to make another variable. I'm going to call it universe Y. Then I'm going to go into my star. I'm going to make the same variables for the star. And what these variables are for is they are going to be the thing that tells us where in the universe our the ship is or the star is. So let's say the ship, it's going to start at screen 00. Let's also have it start at universe position 00. So it's going to start in the very center of the universe. I think. I haven't really thought about whether the center of the universe is 00 or whether, whether positions in the universe can be negative. There might be a good reason to make a decision about that we run into down the road. But for now, we're going to start this at universe X, universe Y. We're going to start the star also at, not also at universe X, universe Y. Let's start it at universe X 500, universe Y 500. So it should be, to the right and above the starship. And of course, if I just hit go now, we haven't changed anything. Our code is exactly the same as it's always, well, our code isn't exactly the same, but our game is exactly the same as it's always been, because there's nothing in our code that uses these two variables, right? We just made these variables. We said there's a number, I'm going to call it universe X. Here's another number, I'm going to call it universe Y. And we're going to put some value, we're going to store some information in them. We can change that number. It can be 0, it can be 500, it can be 12 million. None of that matters because we're never referring to that number again. We're just writing this number down on a piece of paper that we have labeled universe X, and then we are putting it in a folder on our desk to never look at again. We need to look at it again. We need to use it for some set of purposes. So there's a bunch of different things ways we want to use it. Oop, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do that. There we go. So let's think about it for a minute. Okay, so where do we care about this universe X, universe Y? Well, everything in our game that refers to our X and Y position, which is our screen position, we actually want that to refer to our universe position. We don't want to be directly controlling, we don't want our thruster to be directly controlling where the starship is on the screen. We want it to be controlling where the starship is in the universe, and then there's going to be another intermediary layer that takes where it is on the universe and tells the screen where to draw the starship. So everything here that says change X or change Y, we want to be instead change universe X and change universe Y. So change universe X by speed X, change universe Y by speed Y. And that's actually it. That's the whole thing. So now I can spin my ship around, I can press go, and we can see that the starship now never goes out of the center of the screen. So that's right. And we can further see that these numbers are changing. So I'm going to hit stop. we're going to start at 0 again. I'm facing directly to the right. I press up, and we can see that this number here is just going up, relatively quickly. I can turn around, try to face directly to the left, press up, and now we can see that it's going down. I'm moving to the left. But there's no visual representation of that, right? This star is still just sitting here wherever it is. It doesn't care. Nothing cares about these two numbers. So we now need a way to say if, the starship is basically always going to be on the screen. And at first it's always going to be exactly in the center of the screen, although we might change that just to give the starship a kind of feeling of more organic movement. Sometimes it's nice to have the starship kind of be able to move off the center. If you're going to the left, maybe you want the starship to be over here. If you're going to the right, maybe you want it to be over here. Never leave the center by too much distance, but just to give you a little bit more of a visual cue of where you're going. It can look a little better, and it can be helpful. So we probably do want to do that eventually. But at first, the starship is going to be exactly in the center of the screen. It's never going to move, but the star definitely is going to move, right? We should be able to go, the star is at position 500, 500, so we should be able to go up and to the right. And if we go up and to the right far enough, we should get to this star. And then if we go back and to the left, down and to the left far enough, we should no longer have this star on our screen. So actually, let's not do it at 500, 500. Let's do it much closer. Let's do it at 100, 100, just so it's definitely going to be on the screen when we start. That'll make it a little bit easier. So we want somehow, when we press this button to go to the right, as this number goes up, we want this star to start moving to the left until it's off the screen. How are we going to do that? We could assume that the player ship is always exactly in the center, and then we could just do some math involving the, subtracting the player's position from the star's position. But we're going to actually add one more sprite, and I'm going to call it a camera. I'm going to click here. I'm going to click on Paint a New Sprite. This sprite is not going to have any costume at all, so I'm going to call it Blank Costume. And I'm going to call it the camera. So this is going to be the camera sprite. And the camera is just going to be, at the moment, the camera isn't going to do anything other than keep track of, it's going to be a way that we can relate the universe position to the screen position. So the camera is also going to need a universe position. It's going to be somewhere in the universe. So I'm going to go to the star. I'm just going to grab this and put them here. And I'm going to set the camera, this universe X, universe Y. I'm going to say that the camera is at first always going to be just following the player around. The camera is going to sit on top of the player. So set universe X to 0, set universe Y to 0. I don't want to set it to 0. I want it to always be setting it to the player position, which is... All right. And I got a little bit confused. This talking and programming thing at the same time can get a little bit confusing. I want the camera's universe X to always be set to the player's universe X. So I can go to the variables thing here, the variables menu, but I can't get to the player's variables in this menu. The camera can only edit, change the values of its own variables. It only has access to its own variables because that's part of what making something for this sprite only does. This is great. This is fine. There's no problem here because there is a block in sensing. This is kind of this block here that says backdrop number of stage. It's kind of like an arbitrary reporter block. It can get most of the properties from other sprites. Most of the properties you might want to get. There are some things it can't get. And if we run into that, we'll end up having to reprogram things based on making different decisions. But it can get most information, and in particular, it can get for this sprite only variables. So I can go over here to choose player ship, and then I can go here and choose universe X. So I can set the camera's universe X to the universe X of the player ship, set the camera's universe Y to the universe Y of the player ship. So now this blank camera object is just always going to be following the player around. It's always going to be in the same position in the universe as the player. I can verify that pretty easily. You can see that these two agree with each other. Perfect. So that's all well and good. Now I have a bunch of numbers that are relating to each other in some way, and now I need to draw things to the screen. So let's go to the star and let's tell the star how to draw on the screen. What it's going to do is it is going to forever go to a particular position. This is going to be the spot where it's being drawn on the screen. We're going to say go to, I need the minus sign here, and I think I always get this. This is one thing that I always get wrong. But I think what we want to do is we want to take our position, by which I mean we want to take the star's position, which is in variables, and we're going to subtract it. I think we want to subtract it from the camera's position. So let's see, go to X, camera, X position of camera, minus my own personal star X position, which is in variables here. Oh, not X position, sorry, universe X, very important. And the same thing for Y. So I'm going to duplicate this block. I'm going to shrink my play window, grow my coding window so I can see a little bit better. Universe Y of camera minus universe Y. So this is either going to be correct or backwards. So I hit go, and it looks to me like it's backwards because I said it should be to the right and above, and it's actually to the left and below. So I bet if I go to the right, it will, yeah. If I go to the right, it scrolls to the right. That is wrong. So I said I might get this wrong, and I did get it wrong. I just need to go ahead and I need to subtract. I need to reverse the direction of this subtraction. So instead of subtracting the location of the player from the location of the camera, or sorry, the location of the star from the location of the camera, we want to subtract the location of the camera from the location of the star. So now this is working okay. We can see that this, right clicked and now things are going crazy. Okay, so I'm gonna hit stop. We can see it's 100 pixels to the right, 100 pixels above. If I hit go, I fly to the right and it goes to the left. So it's like the ship is moving to the right and the star is scrolling off the screen. Of course, it doesn't actually scroll entirely off the screen. And there are ways that we could fix that. We could make it so that the star, once it gets to this position, it just kind of disappears. And we probably will do something like that eventually. But for the moment, what I'm actually going to do is something that's a little bit cheeky, I think. I'm just going to make a border around the screen. And I'm going to put it in the camera, I think. So when I said that this is a blank costume, actually, I think I lied. How do I get to grayscale? There we go. And I'm just going to make a square. Oh, I don't want that. I want there to be no fill and an outline, a grayscale outline. A grayscale outline, and I'm going to make a, I don't know, 10 pixel wide thing, much bigger, like a 30 pixel wide. See what that's like. Do that. Okay, so that is going to try to line this up. We're going to tell this to be at 0, 0, so it's always in the center of the screen. And we can see that this actually just needs to be way bigger, like 50. And now, does the star disappear? Is the star under the, here? I think it is. So now the star disappears. Oop, Oh, geez. I had that problem again where I was pressing arrow keys and so moved the sprite around. Okay, I'm going to hit stop. I'm going to call this camera border. And I'm just going to do that for the moment. We could do something more fancier at some point, potentially, to make it scroll off the screen, hide when it gets off the screen. But actually, what I think we will really want to do in the long run is something that is a lot like having this border. I think we're going to probably want to have some kind of UI elements around the screen. So we might want to have a border anyway. We might want to have, some like something that tells you how much fuel your ship has, or how much iridium you've picked up, or whatever. And so we might need spots for these, for like menus or status displays, or stuff like that. So having this border is totally fine with me. I have no problem with it. I think it's a great, if a little bit hacky solution to the problem of things scrolling off the screen, or rather of things not scrolling off the screen. So now they do, and that's fantastic. Let's see. So that's great. I've done that. We now have the ability for the star to scroll around the universe. I'm going to do a couple of cleanup-y things first. The first thing I'm going to do is I no longer need all these variables to be visible, kind of cluttering up my workspace. So let's just go ahead and hide them. Go ahead and hide them, and go ahead and hide them. That's thing one. Thing two, let's go ahead and make there be more stars. Let's make it so that there's like a dozen stars that are all in different locations, and we can see, we can go between them. That will be another thing that'll be nice, just to make sure that it's working with more than one star. And then finally, I think I do want to add the feature where I said we don't want the camera to always be exactly where the player is. Maybe we want it to try to chase the player down somehow, so that as the player moves to the right, maybe the camera doesn't. Maybe the camera. If the player is moving to the right, we want the ship to be drawn slightly to the right of the center of the screen to make it more obvious that you are moving in that direction, especially in a game where you have momentum. And so we have this thrust animation, which I say animation, which is maybe overselling the case a little bit. Maybe overselling the case a little bit for that. But we have the thrust animation, and it is telling us that we are applying the thruster in a direction, but we can be moving in a direction that is entirely distinct from where we are facing, and entirely distinct from where the opposite of where the thruster is going, and that is a little bit confusing. So giving us a little bit of a sense of momentum, a sense of movement based on where we're putting the camera seems good. So I'm going to stop justifying that. It was a bit of a long-winded explanation, and I'm just going to do it. Oh, and hello, Bryce. I see at some point in the last little while, we are graced with the Bryce's presence. Hello and welcome. It's great to see you. What am I saying? Great. I want to refresh my brain first. I'm going to make a bunch of extra stars. That's what I'm going to do. So how are we going to make a bunch of extra stars? Now, I could go ahead and I could duplicate this star over and over and over again and have a lot of stars. And I could change these positions for each of them, and that would be okay. And now that I've already kind of done it a little bit, I think I am just going to. And we can see that hopefully this works with all these different stars here. There we go. Looks like I've got some more stars, so that's fine. I don't actually know where these stars are, but they seem to exist. Yeah. Oh, and hello, Bryce. Um, uh, okay, so one of the things that is tricky about having these stars be off the screen entirely and invisible is that I don't actually know where they are, but that's okay. So I made these 4 stars. They all seem to work. They seem to scroll like they're supposed to. That's great, no problems. But at the same time, what if we didn't want to have, we don't actually, in the long run in this game, we want there to be dozens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of stars. It would not only be impractical, but also wouldn't work to have there be hundreds of or thousands of sprites in this little sprite menu. So we're going to get rid of these, and we're going to use a little thing called clones. Clones are, more or less what they sound like. Clones are a way that we can take a sprite and make a bunch of copies of it. So how am I gonna do that? First, I'm gonna give myself a little more room because this block is unfortunately a little bit too long. It's a little bit, I don't know, just takes up a lot of the horizontalness of the screen. But that's okay. We are going to look here and let's go to, is it in control? Yeah, it's totally in control. When I start as a clone and create clone of myself. So when we start the game, let's go ahead and make a bunch of clones. How many stars do we want? I don't know, like 20? Let's make like 20 stars. And then now we're going to have 20 stars. And what are these stars going to do? Well, they are going to all have their own position. Right? So we're going to make 20 clones. We are going to have, every time we get a clone, right? So this goes, repeat 20, create clone of myself. Cool. A clone has been made. So that clone starts doing this. It has when I start as a clone, and it follows this little path here. So I said I wanted every clone to have a different position in the universe. So what's the easiest way to do that? I'm going to go to variables. I'm going to, I already have this set. I'm not going to go to variables. I'm going to go to operators. I'm going to pick a random number. I'm going to pick a random number between negative 500, negative 500 and 500. And let's do the same thing for the y. Now, if I hit the flag, I should get 20 different stars. And look at that. There they are. Scrolling, 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 scrolling. I can turn around and I can go back to visit these stars again. And they are still there. And they are still in the correct locations. And well, very nice. Now, all these stars are all the same. Let's go ahead. This is not how we're going to ultimately do this, but let's go ahead and make them all look a little bit different by adding some more randomness, just for fun. Just for fun. Let's set size to another random number. It's a percentage, so let's set it from 10 to 100. And then let's also do something with its color. And I don't have an extremely good understanding of how the color effect works, so that's okay. But we can see that now I have a bunch of stars of different randomly shaped sizes and colors. Oh, there are two things that I see that are a big problem here. The main one is this little star here. This little star is just stuck. It's just sitting there, and it's following us around. And the reason it's following us around is because, here, I'm going to hit stop, and we can see that star is there. This is the original star. This is the star that begins, that exists. This is the star that exists when we hit, before we hit anything, when we hit the green flag. So this is the star that repeats 20 times and creates 20 copies of itself. So that's awesome. Now these are above the thing. So looks like there's another problem we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to solve the camera border. The fact that the camera border is being drawn below the things it's supposed to be covering up. For now, that's totally fine, but it actually is kind of helpful because it tells us where the planets are, but it's not good. But okay, cool. So we have this original star here. But the problem is that the original star doesn't have any of this code. All of this code says when I start as a clone. This code says when green flag clicked. Well, the thing about this star, this original, is that it never starts as a clone. The thing about these copies, these clones, is that they aren't around when the green flag is clicked. So this code here is only running for this original, and this code here is only running for all these clones. I don't want to have there be two different two different scripts telling my stars what to do. I want all the code for all of my stars to be in one place. So this original star is just going to be it's just going to be a thing that goes around the universe and spawns copies of itself. It's not going to do any of the normal star stuff. It's going to actually be like the spawner of new stars, the maker of stars. So that means we don't want to draw it on the screen. So when the green flag is clicked, we're going to hide. Now if I click the green flag, we don't see any stars at all. Why don't we see any stars? We are making all these clones. Where are they? Well, they are out there. The stars are out there, much like the truth. But they are hidden. They are hidden because we have told the original to hide. And when we make a clone, it has all of the properties. The clone ends up having all the same properties as the thing that it is a clone of. So this one was hidden. The original star is hidden. So the clone is hidden as well. We don't want the clone to be hidden. We want it to be shown. So I'm going to take this show, but I'm going to put it down here after we do all this other stuff. After we set it up, then we'll make it visible. So now I click the flag and all of these stars appear. That's great. Up and down. And we have this problem that I just noted a moment ago, which is that we made this barrier, this border to occlude the stars that we shouldn't be able to see, but then we decided to make the clones, and the clones, when new things are added, they are by default added on top of things that are already existing rather than below. I'm saying on top and below, and I think you know what I mean. I mean that in the sense that this starship is on top of that star because the star is being drawn because you cannot see the star. And this now the star is on top of the starship, but of course that's in this kind of like a z axis stacking number of layers. We also talk about the y-axis up and down as being on top of and below. So I think you know what I mean when I say on top of. We need to make sure that this thing is above, like that. That worked, and that was fine. But what we want to do is we want to make sure it's always doing the right thing. So I picked up this border and put it down. And again, I think when you pick something up with the mouse, when the developer picks something up with the mouse and puts it down, Scratch automatically puts it on top, but that's not really what we want. We also don't want to accidentally click and drag this to the wrong spot. So let's go into our camera code here and say motion, go to 0, 0. Let's keep this in the center. Let's start in the center. And then let's tell it to go to the front. And I believe that is in the looks category. Go to front layer, and we'll do that. So now these stars scroll entirely off the screen like they are supposed to. And we have this central core area where we have 20 stars. And then if we go off into the great beyond, there are no stars at all, because that is how we have written this code. Okay, so now we have the stars. We have 20 stars. They're all scrolling. They all have different sizes and colors. Different sizes and colors. So that is everything we wanted out of drawing the stars. Now I want to make it so that the camera, we have a slightly more sophisticated movement of the camera than just having the starship always be in the center of the screen. So how am I going to do that? Well, at the moment, what I'm doing is I'm setting the universe X to the universe X of the player ship. Instead, what I need to do is have the camera's universe X move towards the universe X of the player ship. So I don't know. I haven't really thought about this. Is not a problem that I've fully thought about. So we're just gonna figure it out right now. We're gonna need to figure out the difference between the universe X and the universe Y, the universe X of the player ship and the camera. We're gonna have to figure out how far away they are, and we're gonna have to be continually moving the camera towards the player ship. Right. So it's gonna be like chasing after the player. The camera's gonna be chasing after the player. And then eventually catching up to it. So let's see. How are we gonna do that? Let's go ahead and do some math here. We're gonna probably need some subtraction. We're gonna need to figure out the distance between the player and the camera. So how do we do that? We are going to do some subtraction. We'll say the universe X of the player minus the universe X of the camera minus the universe X of the player. This is going to be the distance between them. And we're going to do that same thing for the Y. And so then we will know. And let's see. This is how far from the player the camera is right now. And so I think if we tell it, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do something kind of silly. The kind of silly thing you do in coding all the time. I'm going to write some code that I think is going to change nothing at all. That's not going to change anything about the behavior of our program, right? I'm always doing this. I think what I should be doing is I should be saying, what's the difference between how far away in the X dimension is the camera from the player? How far away in the Y dimension is the camera from the player? And however far that is, let's go ahead and move the camera that amount. That was not right. So maybe I reverse these. I'm really, really bad at remembering or thinking through which side of a subtraction sign things should be on. Okay, so that's great. Now, if I go, it does exactly the same thing. This does exactly the same thing, right? So I've said, instead of saying go directly to instead of telling the camera go directly to wherever the player is, set universe X to universe X of player, set universe Y to universe Y of player. Instead of saying go directly there, I've said, okay, camera, figure out how far away from the player you are, and then go that far. Those two amount to the same thing, right? Figure out how far away you are from the player and go that far is a more complicated way of saying go to the player. But now we could do something like make it not quite go the whole way. So is this going to work? This might work. What if instead of going the whole way there, let's go 95% of the way there? So say go 95%, make sure the y lines up with the y and the x lines up with the x. Maybe 95% is a little bit too, oh, I think the player is, I forgot, I was saying maybe 95% is not quite far enough, but that may or may not be true. We haven't actually tested anything yet. I just realized that I have this block of code here, this forever go to x, where we tell the star to be drawn somewhere based on where the camera is. I actually don't have that for the player. So I'm always having the player be drawn in the center of the screen. So that is not right. So let's take this code here. Well, oh my gosh, what have I done? What have I done? And we are going to tell this player to get drawn in the right spot. So that is here. That's here in the star. I'm going to grab this little snippet of code. I'm going to stick it at the bottom of this loop. Something seems, oh, I was going to say something seems awry. What seems awry is that I accidentally put a forever loop inside of another forever loop. That meant, so here, I'll hit go. And I was thinking to myself, I'm pressing buttons. What's happening? Nothing is happening. Something should be happening. What's wrong? When I press the up, at the very least, the thruster animation should work. I shouldn't have broken that, right? But I did, and the reason I broke it is because I have a forever loop here, and then a forever loop here. So I handle input exactly once. I handle physics exactly once. Then I go into this forever loop, and I never leave. I never go back out to the beginning of that one. So, you know, if I am holding down the up button when I press the green flag, then the very first handle input draws this thruster animation, and so it's stuck on. So, okay, we'll put this here, and then this will either work or it won't. And it does. And you can see that the ship has a little bit of movement outside of the bounds of the exact center. We could, yeah, so that's pretty good. I don't know if, well, I don't know. What if we make this a 0.9 and see what happens? It'll be slower. So now if I go speeding off, yeah. So there's some problem here that I'm not fully, I mean, not a problem exactly, but yeah, that's a problem. And I don't really, what is happening there? Why is that? Why do I do this kind of jagged thing where it kind of bounces back and forth? There's some issue that's happening. Go to universe X minus universe, yep. For some reason. I don't know. I'm not gonna debug exactly. This is sort of working. I'm gonna go back to 0.95. I'm gonna hit go, and there is definitely some code. There's some problem here that is causing some kind of like bouncy, jagged movement for some reason. Sometimes. I don't know. I keep seeing it, and then when I try to make it happen, it's not exactly the way that I expect it to be. So I don't know. I'm confused. That's okay. I do think that it's probably about time to be wrapping up. Yep. Oh my gosh. It is about time to be wrapping up. So I am not going to do anything too hard to debug this problem. I'm just gonna let it be. I'm gonna be satisfied that I have the stars that populate a small galaxy of stars that we can fly around and scroll between them. And I'm going to do one more thing, one last tiny thing before we stop, which is just I'm going to, well, I don't know. I was gonna say I was gonna take this block and put it into a custom block called draw on screen, but I'm just gonna leave it here for now. There's something that's confusing about this, and I don't want to mess around with it. So that seems great. Everything seems just fine. We now have, I can hit start. I have a very small procedurally generated galaxy of stars that I can fly my starship between. Of course, nothing happens when we run into stars, and that's fine. That's not a problem. That's something we're gonna have to add later on. So things are looking pretty great. I'm going to say save now. 2, scrolling the galaxy. Wonderful. I'm going to go to the project page. I'm going to make sure this project is shared. And I'm going to update this a little bit. So instead of saying so far the project only has single screen movement, that is not true. Today we added scrolling navigation through a small collection of stars. That all seems fine. Everything about this seems fine. I guess we can add at the moment nothing happens when you fly your starship into a star. We'll say that. Maybe we'll say spaceship. Spaceship into a star. I like it. Maybe we'll say spaceship here too. Ooh. And that seems great. Here it is. I'm gonna press the green flag, and it's working. Maybe we added a simple camera that follows the player around. I think that's perfect. I'm gonna go to my stuff here, and we should be able to see 2, scrolling the galaxy, and indeed there it is in my shared projects. And that is everything that I need. So with that, we're wrapping up. We're wrapping up. It is 1 o'clock. So that this has been fun. Thanks for watching. Hello to official Jono2, who also joined the chat. Hello. I'm so glad you popped in. I'm leaving because we're ending. Maybe you caught other parts of the stream as well. Maybe you did not. But welcome. We're going to be here again tomorrow at noon, continuing to build on this game. So maybe you can pop in another time. Thanks, everyone. Tomorrow we will be... Well, I don't know what we're going to do tomorrow. Tomorrow we will either be making it so that there are, instead of like a dozen stars that you can fly around between, there's like hundreds of stars. Or we'll make it so that something happens when you fly into them. Haven't decided yet. We can think about that. But yeah, that's the plan. See you tomorrow. Thanks. Have fun. Stay inside.